Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to the live recording of the e-commerce podcast. My name is Matt Edmundson, and if you are watching the live stream, just to let you know what is about to happen and what's going on, just so you're aware of everything that is transpiring right now. We are going to record, we're going to do the recording in one take, the e-commerce podcast. And tonight we are going to learn all about first-time buyer conversion. I'm super excited about this one, let me tell you. It's going to be great stuff to get into. First-time buyer conversion with... Anyway, we'll get into all of it. You definitely want to stay and watch it and hang around till the end because it's going to be great. Now, because this is the podcast live recording, I'm just about to play the introduction to the podcast. And you're going to hear me introduce the show again. I just wanted to give you a heads up if you're watching the live stream or you're watching the rerun on YouTube. This is kind of what happens. This is how we do it with the live stream live recording. So hold on to your hats. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to be back in just a few minutes time. I'm just looking for the button. Here it is. I'm going to be back in just a few minutes time to introduce the show. If you do have any questions, do have any comments, you can put them in the comments below the video, whether you're watching on Facebook or whether you're watching on YouTube, and they will come through to me, which is fantastic. Hope that all makes sense. Look forward to seeing you in the comments. I'll be back again as we now start the actual recording, the live recording of the podcast. You get to see how it's all done. All right, be back in a sec.
Welcome to the e-commerce podcast with Matt Edmundson, a show that brings you regular interviews, tips, and tools for building your business online.
Well, hello and welcome to the e-commerce podcast with me, your host, Matt Edmundson. This is a show all about how to grow your online business. Yes, it is. Top tips on how to do digital business, how to do e-commerce. I love this show. I love the fact that every week I get to talk to amazing people from the world of e-commerce, and I get to sit down with them for a good chunk of time and ask them all kinds of questions about what they know and how it's going to help us develop our own online businesses. And today is no exception. We are going to learn what it takes to convert our first-time visitors. What is that going to look like? And how can buyer psychology help us crack this puzzle? And we're going to do all of this with Rishi Rawat, an expert in the field of buyer psychology copywriting. Wow. I mean, that's quite an impressive resume, isn't it? I met Rishi a few months ago and became instantly intrigued by his ideas and his thoughts in this whole this whole area of buyer conversion. He's actually approached this in a way that I have never really seen before. And so I'm super excited to be talking to Rishi on this week's podcast. We are going to deep dive into it. So make sure you stick around to the end as we are going to look at this whole thing of buyer conversion. Now, let me give you a quick introduction to Rishi, then I'll bring him on the show and we are going to get straight into it. Now, for the last 12 years, Rishi has been probing and experimenting to better understand how shoppers choose in a world filled with more choices than ever. Rishi is the CEO of Frictionless Commerce, which uses copywriting to optimize conversion rates. And he is here with us, like I said, to share some great value, some real high impact lessons on buyer conversions. So grab your notebooks. Of course, if it is safe to do so, you are going to want to take notes. But if you're in the car driving or for whatever reason you can't take notes, you'll be pleased to know that all of the notes from today's show will be available as a free download on our website. So just head on over to ecommercepodcast.net/54 and you will be able to download them because this is episode number 54. So that's ecommercepodcast.net/54 to download the show notes. So all of that said, without any further ado, let's get straight into it, shall we? Let's bring on today's guest and welcome Rishi to the show. I'm just going to push this button here and hopefully, as if by magic, here he is. He appears on the screen. Rishi, hey, good evening. Good to see you.
Good to see you. That was quite an intro. I'm very excited.
Good. I'm pleased. I'm pleased that you're here, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. I've been looking forward to this one for a few weeks, Rishi, because it was really intriguing when we, for those that don't know, when we do these podcasts, we always have a separate call. We always just sort of have a catch up, introduce ourselves, and figure out what we're going to talk about. And in our pre-call, you really jumped straight into this whole area of buyer conversion and buyer psychology, and just absolutely fascinated me. So tell me a little bit, how have you got into this whole area of buyer psychology and conversion?
Yeah, so it's a really I was around 16 years old, and I was walking into a retail store, and I was at the entrance of the store, and I was at an interesting vantage point where to my right hand side I could see that there was a customer working on one of the aisles trying to decide if they wanted to buy something or not, and on the extreme left hand side, invisible to the customer, was the store owner who was sitting on the cash register. And I happened to pay attention to the customer, and I noticed that they lifted the object, they investigated it, they put it down, they took a couple of steps away from it, turned away, and then they turned again towards it, walked up to it again. Again, they investigated it, and they put it down, and then they walked away and just left the store. And they were having this moment of struggle. Clearly, they were interested in the said item. Mm-hmm. And clearly, they had some questions in their mind that they were trying to work through themselves, and they couldn't solve it. And as I kind of looked at the store owner, I had this thought, which was that at the end of the day, the store owner is going to tally up the cash and decide if it's been a good day or a bad day. And completely oblivious to this moment of struggle that happened, that could have been a potential sale. And this, how many times has this happened? Does this happen 100 times a day? Has this happened 10,000 times in the last 5 years? And I thought to myself, what a wasted metric to focus on the cash register, and all of this data is being lost. And I didn't know what to do with this insight. That's the insight I had. I had no idea I didn't know anything about e-commerce. I don't even think it was a real thing back then. And so this kind of thought, this idea virus was in my head. I just didn't know what to do with it. And, circumstances of life unfolded, and I found myself in this unique intersection between design and marketing and technology. And I've been exploring that ever since.
Wow. Wow, that's a fascinating story. So this guy who was intrigued by something but didn't buy it in a store has sort of kickstarted your whole journey. Wow. And so here we are. I mean, that was when you were 16, you said, right? So it was more than 2 years ago. Let's just leave it that way. And so you've been pursuing biopsychology ever since, and you've been getting into that. So let's define what you mean when you use the phrase biopsychology. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, buyer psychology is, I would say, a scientific curiosity into understanding how consumers make purchase decisions, and that's what I would leave it at. It's just it's an interest in unpacking the human brain. I don't think there's anyone who's ever been able to unpack it, nor do I think we'll be able to ever unpack it completely. But there are certain fragments of decision science when it comes to consumer products that we do have a pretty good handle on. Mm-hmm. So I would just say buyer psychology is, from a marketing perspective, is the quest to understand how decisions get made.
Okay, so you use this phrase, decision science, which I think is quite an interesting phrase. So let's unpack that a little bit more. What do you mean by that phrase?
Well, to me, and I don't know what the classical definition is, and I'm thinking about decision science from the perspective of the science of making decisions, which I think is a distinction from decision science. So I define science of making decisions as when a consumer is interacting with a stimulus, whether that stimulus is an ad in a newspaper or a TV commercial or a physical product, what sequence of triggers are happening in their mind. And I'm looking at it specifically from the perspective of them making a purchase, not opinions. It's like, what triggers can we triangulate around as marketers to say, okay, these sequence of events lead to a purchase, so let's have our advertising do more of that.
Yeah. Okay. So a sequence of events. I'm just writing notes here. If people are looking at me on the video going, why does he keep looking down? Genuinely, I'm pen and paper still. It's the way of the future. And I'm writing notes down as we go along. So it's one of the phrases you used right at the start about this chap that was picking up the thing in the supermarket, which I've noted down here. I really like this sort of moment of struggle was the phrase that you use, this sort of internal debate. Do I buy this? Do I not buy it? There's obviously a bunch of questions going through their head to try and figure out yes or no. That's the binary decision that they're going to come to. And they're obviously having this internal debate, this internal struggle. Are there some common things that people struggle with that we as e-commerce store owners should think about and should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing I've spent the last, I would say, the last 12 years investigating, and the last 5 years investigating through rigorous science.
Okay.
And what we've identified is, and again, I want to be very clear about this, the human brain is more complicated in many ways than the universe itself. So I'm not going to pretend like I understand the inner workings of how the brain works. We're talking about in very specific circumstances. We're talking about how decisions may get made around consumer products, how, and what are some of the variables involved.
Mm-hmm.
I recognize that there are probably a million variables, and there is a situational variance from consumer to consumer. So I don't think we can generalize. But what we can say is that, and this is the thing about marketing, is that when you think about marketing at scale, you need to identify the common variables. So we do understand there's nuance here. We understand there's variability here as well. But we want to find some of those basic drivers. And what we've identified through rigorous testing is that there are 9 principal drivers that take the consumer from, being interested in something. So we're looking at post-engagement to purchase. And there are 9 specific variables that come into play in various degrees. And depending on what the product is, some variables may be dormant, and other variables may be, may play a dominant role. So there are 9 specific variables.
Okay. And can you share what they are?
Yeah, I absolutely can. So the first variable is too good to be true. And basically, that is our defense mechanism for essentially being swindled. And we are constantly making sure that we don't get screwed over. And let's before we get into that, even let's kind of step back and understand what the broader context is here for why these things even matter. So your viewers would be very interested in knowing. It's a sad fact for an e-commerce business, but it's reality. Every year, 20,000 new consumer products are launched, 98% of which totally fail. So Imagine we have 20,000 new businesses every year thinking they've invented the best product in the world, taking all of their budget and spending on advertising. Imagine what the consumer is going through. I think I saw a study at some point. And it's hard to actually quantify scientifically how many ads people are exposed to, but there is a basic study that says around 5,000 ads a day consumers are exposed to.
Wow.
So our brains simply have not evolved to process information in that magnitude. And so what happens is that there are these are instinctive systems that kick in, and the consumer, you and I, is not even actively aware of. It's not like the brain is saying yes, no, 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 yes, yes, no, yes. I don't even hear that chatter. There's chatter going on, but at a very subconscious level, 98%, 99% of the garbage that's coming my way is being conveniently deleted by the brain. And so there is this subconscious mechanism that is happening all the time, which we call the system 1 mode. And it is basically helping us navigate life. If you're driving a car and if you start taking in all the stimuli that's outside in the world, you will have a crash in the next 4 seconds. So our brains have evolved to say, hey, I'm going to shut off all of this external stimuli. And so in that context, we have those nine triggers. And the first one is too good to be true. It's a defense mechanism. All of these triggers are self-survival. I mean, ultimately, let's keep in mind that it's not like modern marketers have created this brain response. We're talking about something, modern human beings emerged 200,000 years ago in sub-Saharan Africa. These mechanisms have been evolving since then. So all of this that I'm talking about, this too good to be true, essentially, as far as the brain is concerned, is nothing to do with consumer products. It's when you're looking for water supply and you sense that there's a safe water supply, and if you're wrong, you're dead. So
it's important to be skeptical.
So the too good to be true is our brain's way of saying, hey, you've made bad choices before. I don't want to die.
Which is important when it comes to consumer products, I feel, especially some of them you can buy on the web. Okay, so the first one, too good to be true. This idea that the brain is actually naturally skeptical about things, and it it takes some convincing. It takes some help to convince them. And so you've said this is the first one. Is this the actual starting point that we should think about as marketers? We should actually start right here at this point number one, which says, okay, people are going to be naturally skeptical. Their brains are going to automatically default to think there is an element of too good to be true here. We don't want to get screwed over. We don't want to die from drinking the wrong water choice here. We need to examine this a little bit more. And so that's the default sort of starting position that people come into our website are in. That's really good. Okay, have I got that right so far?
You do. I mean, just to give some context, and I don't want to overwhelm your audience with unnecessary detail. I think it's completely fine to start here, but just keep in mind that the story does start a little. It's almost like the Old Testament and New Testament in the Bible analogy. Mm-hmm. So there is more to the story. But I feel, again, speaking of cognitive load, if I were to just talk about everything that we've figured out or we've explored in the last 12 years, it would be very uninteresting. I think it's okay for us to stick to the nine criteria. And then if someone's really interested, they can reach out to me and I can talk to them about the whole picture. But sure. This would be a great place to start.
Great. Okay. So number one, too good to be true. The sort of the natural state of skepticism of the brain. So where do we go to from there?
So again, I should just mention that these are not on a hierarchy of do step one first, step two first. I think it's all situational. So if you are selling a product, for example, let's say you're a retailer and you're deep discounting. For you, too good to be true, for your consumers, too good to be true would play a pretty important role. Mm-hmm. If you are selling a premium product, maybe the efficacy of the product is the too good to be true aspect, but maybe you don't even have maybe your product isn't really something that warrants a too good to be true response. So mm-hmm. I don't look at them as a hierarchy. I look at them situationally. But it is one of the triggers that we need to, as marketers, be aware of and write copy to combat.
Yeah, and I like what you said there. It's not just about your, if you're deep discounting, the too good to be true thing is going to be about the value of your offer. 60% off. What's that all about?
Right.
So, and I'm your worst skeptic. As soon as it's over 30%, I'm like, this is a con. Something's not right. So I get that, and I like what you said about premium products, which aren't discounted, but actually, are they worth it? Are they worth this premium price, the efficacy of it? So actually, what we've got to do, if I'm hearing you right here, Rishi, is as business owners, we've got to sit back and look at our products and ask ourselves, what about our offering, whether it's the price, the offer, whatever it is, what of that is going to fall into this idea of being too good to be true? Right.
That's exactly right. And it's not even just the price. It's even the way we are telling our story. So what's happening is every word words get converted into information and energy, and the consumer is subconsciously translating that energy to mean, is this word trustworthy or not?
Mm-hmm.
So even the language you use, even the pace with which you are writing your copy, the cadence of the copy, all of these things can kind of play a role. So yes.
Okay, I'm with you so far, bud. So what's number two? I appreciate this is not a hierarchy, but this is what's the second one?
Find expertise sexy.
Find expertise sexy.
We are drawn to experts. The best example of this is when we go to the doctor, we completely submit to what the doctor is saying. We don't have a dialogue with the doctor effectively. If the doctor says that this is the treatment that I've prescribed for you, 98% of people will just get that treatment, and that's what it is. And so that is also a mechanism through which the brain makes sense of the world. What are the experts doing? How are the smartest people in my herd dealing with this uncertainty? And then you kind of triangulate towards that, and probabilistically, it's actually a very good strategy. And so, from a marketing perspective, what I mean by this is that the copywriter, the marketer, has to, through words and through energy, has to communicate to the reader that I know you are dealing with anxiety about this decision, and I know that there is uncertainty in your mind about if this product will work the way that we're promising it will. I want you not to look at me as a marketer, but to look at me as a trusted friend who is recommending this product to you, because I truly believe, based on your use case, the way you use products, this is going to give you the outcome you're looking for.
Wow. Okay. So how do we do that without sounding pretentious? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's there's this fine line, isn't there, when you come across as an expert as being actually someone like who is a trusted friend, and then there's someone who goes, I'm the best thing since sliced bread, and I can actually get turned off a little bit like that. So how do we manage that in our own sites?
That's a really good point, actually. And so that's one of the things that we extract. We do this process of interrogating our clients, which are typically inventors, and they've invented a consumer product. And so what the consumer is seeing is the finished product. They're actually not seeing the struggle and the expertise that went into crafting this product. I'll give you a great example. One of my clients sells a sheet of metal, steel, that is used to bake the most delicious pizza in the world. And they are extremely successful, and they are, and their success is a validation of the fact that what he's invented is an incredibly effective method to build a very unique kind of pizza where the outer crust is crunchy and the inner part is soft and gooey, soft. But the thing is that piece of metal, it's called baking steel, is 7 mm thick. And it was just a simple fact on the website. And so I interrogated the client and I said, why is it 7 millimeters thick? He said, well, actually, we tried 6 millimeters. We tried 8 millimeters. We tried all of these different combinations, and we discovered through permutation and combination, and by actually baking pizza using those thickness, that 7 millimeter was producing the best outcome. So I wrote copy around that on the product page. I'm positioning us as being an expert in knowing the right thickness to use for a sheet of metal.
That's fascinating. And I love that. And it's a bit like I guess if I'm just bringing it back here, what we're doing here is showing expertise without being pretentious. And it's like, oh no, we tried this and and this is and we're telling the story of how we've ended up. And it's like one of the things that I've seen work very well. You go onto a website and they sell shoes, leather shoes, and what they do is they show you a video of how they handcraft these shoes, right? Not we're the best shoemakers in the world. This is just how and you look at the effort and you kind of go, oh, okay, well that's worth, the extra money that you're going to be charging for on the site, just with that simple video, that simple demonstration of expertise. Is that the kind? Have I got that right? That's the kind of thing.
You've nailed it. You're my favorite student.
Yeah. Awesome. Love that. Love that. As long as I'm the favorite, I'm the main one. That's cool. So that's the find expertise sexy. I like that phrase, Rishi. That's cool. So what's part 3 of this?
The third one is root for people who overcome the odds or who beat the odds.
Okay.
We all love a hero story. We all love David versus Goliath. We want to spend our dollar. We use our dollars to cast a vote for what we believe in. So when you're selling a balm for a beard balm, the consumer who also happens to have a beard is spending their hard-earned dollars to say, I support what you're doing. I want more people to appreciate the lifestyle of having a beard, for example. I'm making this up completely, but it's a vote. $1 is a vote, or a pound is a vote. And so how do consumers decide who they're going to bet on? So they want to bet on someone. They want to bet on the winner, but they want to bet on a winner that has overcome the odds. So we don't want to just bet on someone who, hey, I just struck lucky and I found the right product and just give me all your money. We want to support the person who says, I got the crap kicked out of me through life and I failed and I kept on iterating. And then one day the clouds parted and I figured out how to do it. And here's what I discovered. We like those stories, And this is the reason why I was saying that not all of these 9 triggers have to apply to every scenario. This is a very specific story arc and it may not be consistent with your reality. So you won't use it, but it is a story arc available. It's almost like there's a slot available in the consumer's mind, but it may not apply to your product.
Yeah, no, that's very, very true. Now, does this extend beyond, I guess, the owner? I'm just thinking here, I wear on my wrist, I can't remember the name of it. There's a certain type of band here and the band is made by recycled plastic, and the metal clip on it is made from, and this is what fascinated me, this is made from seized guns that were melted down and repurposed to this. So this thing here, this metal clasp, has a story which kind of makes me feel good. It's a decommissioned weapon which is now off the street. Is that in my head, I'm kind of thinking, well, is this a case of the product itself has sort of overcome the odds? The product itself has gone from being something awful and has overcome these incredible odds and now is on, is part of the story as well.
That's a great, really fascinating observation. And I'm pretty sure. So one of the things I should also mention is that these 9 triggers, think of them as first cousins. They kind of share a lot of DNA. So there is commonality between them. So sometimes it's hard to actually categorize them perfectly. I'm trying to think, I'm going to draw a blank on this, but I'm trying to think about what you're describing. We would just describe what you've done as, so we call these product story angles. So you've identified a version of the story, and I think that's such a beautiful story, by the way. And I hope that's what that's really, really fascinating. Yeah, I don't know how it would. Sometimes product story angles fit into a tactic, but sometimes product story angles encompass a whole bunch of tactics. So this could be a clustering of maybe 2 or 3 different triggers as well.
Okay. Rishi, let me tell you, I'm loving this conversation. So we've got too good to be true. Find expertise. I can't read my own writing. Find expertise sexy. And number 3, the third trigger you talked about is root for people who overcome the odds. We like the people that sort of overcome insurmountable odds. Now, listen, if you're watching the live stream or if you're listening to the audio podcast, don't go anywhere. We are just going to take a quick moment to thank this week's show sponsors, and we are going to be back in the second part for the other 6 triggers. I can't wait. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back very, very soon. Let me give a big shout out to one of our show sponsors, Curious Digital. You know what? I love its flexibility. It's such a great platform. You know how when you start out, you might typically use an online platform because they're cheap, they're easy to use, super accessible, but you know what? They aren't that flexible. And as your business grows, you end up moving to an agency, right? because that's just what you do. And at some point, you're going to have this nightmare to deal with, and it can be incredibly expensive. And the thing for me that I love about KD is it will grow with you. You can start out on the platform easily, and as your business grows, then KD will adapt with you. Now, I don't know of any other platform that does all of that. So if you're in the market for a new e-commerce platform, make sure you follow the links from mattedmundson.com. Take advantage of the offers that they've got for you, and let me know what you think. Okay, I am with Rishi. We are talking about 9 triggers to do with buyer psychology and how to convert our first-time visitors. Now, we have gone through the first 3. Rishi, what is number 4? I've got my notebook ready. I'm taking notes, brother. So let's get into number 4.
The fourth one is fascinated by surprising details.
Okay.
And this one basically is that we are junkies for new information. We collect new information, and so when you are selling your product, if you can encapsulate in that selling process some surprising details. For example, if you're selling a product that blends smoothies, for example, if you can inject in that storytelling some really interesting details about the benefits of a smoothie, something that people won't know, that what surprising details do, it's actually very interesting. It's actually an indirect benefit. What it does is it acts as an energy boost. So think about conversations you have with people. When people share interesting data points, I'll share an interesting data point. There was a study that was done of 130 million e-commerce sessions, and they found that the average session duration for an e-commerce website is 3 minutes and 27 seconds. Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting, curious detail, and I can guarantee you that most people listening to this will remember that because it's such a fascinating tidbit. And what it does is it actually adds a little bit of energy boost to the conversation. So yeah. I use interesting details, especially when we're writing long form copy. I look at it as it's taking energy away from the reader to some extent because people have low attention spans. So when you inject in some interesting details, you're giving the reader a boost of energy. And it's a branded boost of energy because you're giving an interesting detail, not about some random fact, but a fact that relates to, in some way, to what your product is doing. So that is something we like to do a lot because my job as a copywriter is to make sure that the consumer has read my entire sales pitch, not just the start of it, not just the middle of it, but the whole sales page. So I need to use interesting details to keep them interested. And if they've read the whole sales pitch, there's a statistically high probability that they'll buy from me.
Yeah. Okay. So fascinated by surprise and details. I was actually fascinated when you said that. I mean, it was kind of proof was in the pudding, right? And if you were like me listening to it, surprised by, fascinated by surprising details. I was kind of like, okay, well, I'm actually fascinated by this surprising detail. So that was great. Okay. Number 5.
We are visual animals. 50% of our brain is devoted to processing information, visual information. I was in a hotel a couple of years ago, and you know how hotels are trying really hard. I know you're an eco-minded person, so hotels are trying really hard to not have guests just throw their towels after the first use for laundry, because that's very ecologically it's not a good outcome. And so they had a little card that was in the restroom, in the toilet, in the bathroom, that said that in the last year, from the water that we've saved by having guests not throw their towels in for a wash, you can fill 13 Olympic pools of water. Wow. And the moment I read that, in my mind, I saw 13 Olympic pools. Now, I have no idea how big an Olympic pool is, but I'm imagining a crap ton of water.
Yeah.
And so, it just instantly, even though I wasn't intending for it to happen, it just turned into a visual. And the visual stuck with me. I'm telling that visual to you right now. So, visuals are super powerful. So how do we incorporate them into our storytelling? And there are a bunch of things here as well. There are a couple of types of visuals. There's the contrast visual. So you can use a visual to kind of contrast what you're saying against something else. You can use a visual as an analogy. So sometimes, like, for example, if we're trying to show we're talking about a feature, we can use a visual that shows, maybe if we're talking about balance, this probiotic helps balance the good bacteria and the bad bacteria. We can have a visual of a bird that's walking on a ledge, and the bird is kind of tipping over, and you can have copy that says, it's like the bird is trying to balance. And so you're using an analogy to kind of reinforce that same point. And then, of course, visuals can also be used to visually communicate a feature that was not that was not mentioned visually. So visuals are very powerful, and those are the three ways in which you use it.
Yeah. Okay. That's really, really good. Does the I guess the thing that I'm thinking here, the you're talking about the 13 Olympic swimming pools. The immediate example that comes to my mind, and I'm curious if this is the same sort of thing, was when the iPod first came out and Steve Jobs said it's 10,000 songs in your pockets rather than 2 gigs or whatever everyone else was saying. He took a meaningless piece of information, and all of a sudden I can understand what 10,000 pockets in my it means. Do you know what I mean? I'm seeing what that is. Is that right? Have I got that?
You nailed it. He created and he used a contrast, right? So he said 10,000 songs and he said pocket. So we know how big a pocket is. We know how much 10,000 is, and it creates this contrast.
Yeah, like how is that possible? Especially when I grew up with cassettes and CDs, and how does that work, Steve? So yeah, it was one of those brilliant lines of marketing, wasn't it? That you just kind of thought.
It is a classic, and we actually use it. We talk about it as well. Yeah.
Okay, so trigger number 6.
People need motivation to break habit.
Okay.
One of the this is one of the biggest mistakes that marketers make, is that when we are telling our story, we are so focused on how our product is better than the competition. What we don't realize is that we're not actually competing against the competition. We're competing against non-consumption. So in the case of the band that you're wearing in your hand, they're not competing against other companies that also make bands that are made of decommissioned guns. They're competing against the consumer, saying, I think this is really interesting, but I don't really know if I need it.
That's really fascinating. We're not our competition is not what we think it. We're actually competing against non-consumption.
Non-consumption.
I like that. That's cool. How does that work then? How does that work? I get that works for a unique product, like say this band. But let's say I'm just looking around my desk here. So let's say I've got my Lego Indiana Jones. Look, he's kind of cool. He sits on my desk. But let's say I'm a website which sells this product, and there's 12 other websites which sell the same product. They're still my competitors, but I'm still competing with non-consumption. Is that right?
You are still competing against non-consumption. I see the point you're trying to make here. I think marketers do a fairly good job of contrasting what they have against other websites.
Yeah.
But they leave this gaping hole. And part of what we're trying to do with these 9 triggers is we're trying to highlight tactics that are not being utilized. We're not saying these are the only tactics. We're saying that there are many tactics that marketers do a pretty good job with. So talking about what our product does in relation to the competition, we actually do a fairly good job with it. But we don't actually talk about it against non-consumption. Yeah. Also, we don't talk about it in contrast to workarounds. So imagine if I was on a bike website. They sell these regular cycles, that you can buy, and you can ride a cycle for good health. And they were talking about how their bike was incredible, but they didn't really think about. First of all, they didn't think about non-consumption, but there's also this idea of workarounds. Imagine if if I'm a consumer, I'm buying a bike because I want to be healthy. So I can buy a bike and I can be healthy that way. But I can also run on my treadmill. That is a workaround for buying a
Yeah.
bike,
Yeah.
right? So they could have written copy that says that if you are, the treadmills are awesome, but science has proven that on a long-term basis, they can add a lot of pressure to your knees, which you
Yeah.
don't have when you ride a bike. So you've actually already made the enemy and you've destroyed the enemy. And that's the workaround. So we're competing against that workaround. So
Okay. Now, turning the page here. Number 7. What's our 7th trigger?
So number 7 is we love personalized experiences. So when a consumer is buying something, no matter what they're buying, they like to know that experience that they're being sold to in a personalized way. So the great analogy of this is like when you go to a sales, when you're when you're buying a retail store, the salesperson is engaging you in a conversation, and then he reflects back to you a story that is based on the data you just gave him, or her, right? So it's a personalized experience, and we fall for it every time. So if you can personalize stuff, it just has this amazing ability to really connect with and it works at a subconscious level. So that's point number 7.
Yeah, and I've seen that work and I'm not trying to be an Apple fanboy here. One of the example that sticks out in my head was, I remember taking my team into the Apple shop because I wanted them to understand this point. I'm like, I want you to watch that guy over there, right? And what was going on was there was a sales rep for Apple, and this elderly gentleman came in and just said to the guy, I need to buy an iPad. And so that guy says, we need to go and talk to Johnny over there. Go stand there and I'll let Johnny know and he'll come talk to you. He's our iPad expert. And Johnny comes over, doesn't talk about the iPad under any circumstances. He just says, why do you want an iPad? And this elderly gentleman says, and we stood there listening to him, just ears dropping on the conversation. He said, because I want to be able to do that thing, whatever they call it, where I can call my grandchildren and see them. In other words, he wanted to be able to FaceTime his grandkids, right? And he just wanted to be able to do that. So this guy, the sales guy, then says, let me show you how easy it is to do that. Right, and he goes and stands on one side of the store with an iPad, and he says, when it rings, just press that button there. And he calls the guy, and they have this video conversation across the store. It takes like 20 seconds, and then he says, "No, you try it." And he gets the elderly guy to call him. Right, he was literally there for 4 minutes and bought this iPad. This guy didn't talk once about how to do email. He didn't talk once about processor speeds or any of that sort of stuff. He just laser focused in on this personalized experience. And it was magical to see.
And that guy that's a wonderful story. That's exactly right. That's exactly what we want to do. One of the things, this is one of the questions that someone's going to have as they're listening to this is they'll say, well, I can understand how a human being in a human-to-human circumstance can personalize a story. How do I do it on my product page? I mean, how do I personalize a story based on who the visitor is? And actually, you can absolutely do it. And we have tons of evidence, lots of test evidence around it. I'll give you guys one example. Okay. So we were working for a client that sells a room air purifier for $900. Pretty expensive item. It's a high consideration item, so people don't just randomly buy an air purifier. And the buying cycle is relatively long. And one of the things that we discovered in our research was that, hey, look, this is a pretty technical product, and there's so many technical details that we need to talk about. In fact, the product page already was talking about a lot of technical details. But we realized that not just like that older gentleman in the Apple store, the consumer actually, that a certain buyer may actually not need that much detail. They may just want a quick summary. And now the question was, what should the product page be for? Should it be for the majority? Or should it be for the group that spends the most? And so we did a test, and in our test, when you get to the product page, there's an opening intro for what the product does. So at least everyone is oriented about what the product does. And then right below that, it asks the simple question, how much time do you have today? And there were 2 buttons. I have 2 minutes and I have time. And the way we designed it was that if someone is a methodical shopper and they want to consume all the details, they're going to click on I have time. And if someone basically doesn't want all those details, they're going to click on I have 2 minutes. And when you click on I have 2 minutes, we showed you the elevator pitch of our sales pitch. And when you clicked on I have time, we showed you everything. We threw everything at the wall. And we noticed overall there was a 30% improvement in purchase rates for their already best-selling air purifier by simply giving consumers these two choices.
Wow. A 30% increase in conversion. That's ridiculous. That's incredible. That's incredible. Okay, so let's talk about the 8th trigger.
They like knowing they've stumbled on something rare.
They like
nobody likes to buy nobody.
Okay, knowing they've stumbled on something rare. Yep.
So nobody wants to buy a commodity, even though you are buying a commodity. You don't want to feel like you're buying a commodity. So we want to buy something that not everyone has access to. It's like an exclusive club. Part of the reason why certain restaurants are so popular is because it's hard to get into them. Yeah. And so how do we convey that? Again, this is something that doesn't apply to every single brand, but it is something that marketers do not such a good job with.
Okay, that's really interesting. So how would you do that on an e-commerce website for your product? How would you convey that kind of exclusivity, that rarity?
So so I'll give you a great example. So imagine if you are selling organic premium dog food. If I was working for a client that was selling organic premium dog food, I would write copy that says 1% of dog owners give their dogs premium dog food or organic premium dog food. So you're basically conveying that this is it's essentially we're exploiting exclusivity. So the reader feels that I found something that not everyone has access to, and then it just draws them in. So it's a trigger. I won't say it's none of these tactics by themselves are going to take the consumer from I'm interested, I'm going to buy, but as a whole set, as an orchestra, they can do wonders.
That's fantastic. I like that. So we like knowing we've stumbled on something rare. So what's the final trigger, Rishi?
Must overcome their negative thoughts.
Okay. That's kind of self-explanatory.
Yeah.
But is this different from the first one, which talks about their skepticism? How do these two differ?
They're actually diametrically opposite. So too good to be true is too positive, and must overcome negative thoughts is negative. So if, for example, you sell a product and your shipping is $17.95, that instantly creates a negative thought in my mind, because it's like, I don't want to be spending $17.95 for shipping. So now you have to build a story around it and explain why that is worth it. So it's a negative thought. It's not too good to be true. It's a negative thought.
Okay. And I like how you've sort of bookended your 9 with these two diametrically opposed sort of things. That's brilliant. So we've got I'm just going to recap here. Okay. So we've got our 9 elements: too good to be true. Number 2, find expertise sexy. Number 3, we like people who have overcome the odds. Number 4, we're fascinated by surprising details. Number 5, we are visual animals. Number 6, people need motivation to break their current habits. Number 7, we love a personal experience. Number 8, we like knowing that we've stumbled on something rare. And number 9, we've got to overcome the negative thoughts in the person's mind. And so those are 9 sort of triggers, 9 sort of tactics that we can use in our copy. Let's bring all this back together. And thank you for sharing that, by the way. That was just pure gold. What has this got to do, these sort of 9 areas? I'm sort of listening to this thinking this is all great. And at the start of the show, we talked about how we're going to convert our first time buyer. And I remember when we talked in our pre-call about you have this sort of this drive to focus on the first time buyer. It's like, you talked about the importance of focusing on the first time buyer. So can you bring these 9 elements together for us in context of a first-time buyer? Maybe a few examples, a few stories.
Absolutely. So let me start off with some interesting data for your viewers. There was a survey done by DataBox, and they found that 68% of all visitors on an e-commerce website are brand new. So it's very likely that all of your listeners have an overwhelming number of people that have visited their website for the very first time, and statistically speaking, will never come back. And so this is the biggest group of people that are on our website. And one of the challenges with marketing is there are four principal areas of marketing. There is converting first-time buyers. There is increasing average order value. Reactivations, which is converting someone who bought from us 2 years ago but hasn't bought since. There is subscription selling, so you're getting people on a subscription plan, and there is word of mouth marketing. So these are like 5 principal areas of marketing. And typically what teams do is they divide their attention across these 5 silos. And my recommendation is, considering the fact that 68% of people are completely new to our website and will never come back again, majority of which will never come back again, why focus on these other things? Why not laser focus on converting first-time buyers? Typically for websites, their first-time buyer conversion rate is no more than 4%. So we have an atrociously low conversion rate. So it just makes sense to focus on converting more first-time buyers. And this is something that is really interesting, is that if you can improve your conversion rate for first-time buyers, you're actually improving all of the other metrics as well, because they're all related. So if you can improve someone, if you can get someone to buy for the first time, they are way more likely to do word of mouth marketing for you. They're way more likely to be a subscription, so that's the reason why I focus in on first time buyers.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. So 96%, that's a big portion of the whole thing. So, where do we start, I suppose, with these 9 elements that you've talked about and how we engage first-time buyers? If I'm sat there looking at my website, I like what you said, Rishi, but help me distill it down. Where do I start? Do you know what I mean? I'm looking at the website. I've got 400 pages on it. Where do I start? What do I do?
Okay. So, first of all, obviously this depends on how broad and the depth of your product line, and depends on a whole bunch of things. But I would say that if I'm working for a client where they have 10 different products and there is one product, I would focus on the bestseller first of all. So that's the center of gravity for me. So I would look at 2 specific metrics. I would look at what is the revenue that the bestseller is driving, because if we're looking to improve numbers by 20%, so we want to focus our energy where we get the highest bang for our buck. So the bestseller is a place to start, because that's where you're selling the most of. But then I would also look at what is the visibility of my bestseller. This is a very startling, going back to point number 5, surprising details. I'll share with your readers something really interesting, which is that, and I've seen this 500 times to know that this is a statistical certainty, is that what we find is that we look at the revenue contribution of a bestseller on an e-commerce website, which of course all your listeners probably do as well. Then we also look at the visibility of that bestseller. So we look at the discovery rate for that bestseller page. So let's say the bestseller is driving 27% of overall sales. You would want 27% of site visitors to have discovered this bestseller, because you want it to be synchronized with the visit number and the revenue number. What we will find is that the discovery rate for that bestseller in 9 times out of 10 is 18%, 17%. So you have this huge delta between discovery and purchase. So the first thing I would do is I would create parity and make sure that more people discover my bestseller. So simple things like that. And so, that would help a first-time buyer anyway, because most first-time buyers would probably want to buy the most popular item. But if they don't even discover it, that's a point of friction right there. So that's something that they can do, as a starting point. They can say, okay, what's our bestseller? How many people are discovering it? Let's create a mechanism to get more people to discover our bestseller.
That's absolutely gold advice right there. So what are some of the ways that maybe I could do that? Simple ways that I could help help make the product more discoverable?
So we have a very specific formula for this. So what we do is we set a cookie, and when a user comes to the website and they've seen 3 pages, so we trigger the cookie, we trigger the element on page 3. And when they go to page 3, and we exclude the bestseller page from this. So if they've gone to the bestseller page in the first 3 pages, then they're excluded from the experiment. But if they haven't, we then show them a floating tab that is a nudge that simply says, have you seen, we have a lot of products, but have you seen our bestseller, or some variation of that copy? And invariably people will click on it and they will discover your bestseller. And that directly improves revenue of bestsellers.
Wow. And I'm intrigued. I feel like you've opened a door here, and I'm going to walk straight through it. Why wait until the 3rd page before you show that tab?
I don't think we've tested different variations of this. We just thought logically that, hey, listen, let people. Okay, so one of the things that we were thinking about was we want the user to start getting engaged with the website. The thing is, if you take them to the bestseller too soon, so like if they just land on the website and you're like, okay, see my best-selling product, they haven't even properly oriented themselves yet, and they will feel like you're being heavy-handed, right? So we want to be subtle about it, and then show them a little nudge once they've signaled to us that they're engaged with what we're saying. Okay.
So this is something that actually I'm curious to see what the results are when you test that cookie on various different view links. So we're helping to be more discoverable, and then you said you're going to focus in on the product page. So we're going to make the product page more discoverable. What's something that we could do maybe with the product page?
So and again, I really hope that viewers aren't like having their eyes glaze over at this point, saying, okay, this was the start of interesting, and now there's so much minutia. And I promise them it's not really that complicated. I want to keep things really, really simple. But essentially on the product page, your product description to me is where the magic happens. So I want to draw as much attention to the product description. And then once I have drawn their attention to the description, I want to tell them a story that is so compelling that I look at it as almost like a court case where I am a lawyer that is representing my client. The buyer is the ultimate judge. And so I need to bring forth an argument for the judge. And so that's what the product description does. It's essentially making that argument. And we are framing that argument around those 9 dimensions that we just discussed earlier. Yeah. That's how I would focus on converting the first-time buyer.
Okay. Have you got, and this is just a question that's come to my mind really, have you got an example of a website that's doing this well that maybe people could go and have a look at?
The only examples the answer is this is a question that has come up a couple of times. I actually don't spend enough time studying what other marketers are doing with their pages. I don't think there's a perfect example of a product page, except for the pages that we've worked on where we do apply all 9 tactics. So I can certainly link to, I mentioned Baking Steel earlier on the call. Their product page perfectly encapsulates this process, and we've tested it. So this is, this is something we've A/B tested on their website. But I don't have another example of, I don't have an example to share right now. But if I think of something,
But so if I Google Baking Steel, I'm curious to see their page come up and have a look at it. So
that's right.
Rishi, listen, I feel like I could go on. I've got thousands of questions, but I'm aware that at some point we have to end the podcast. It's been an absolute treat to talk to you about all of this. And I'm sure that there are people like me listening going, goodness me, I would love to connect with you more around this topic. So how do people connect with you? How do people reach you?
I'm pretty active, more so than I should be, than that's healthy, on LinkedIn. So if any of your listeners are on LinkedIn and they search for my name, Rishi, Rishi, last name Rawat, you will find me. I also have a newsletter where here's my sales pitch for the newsletter. I study 80 e-commerce websites every 2 weeks. and it's just part of my job. I need to look at what other marketers are doing, and what happens is in that process, I discovered these little nuggets of insight, these really clever little things that some marketer somewhere has done for a small little website in some corner of the world. And I look at it and I say, this is pure genius. And I take a screenshot of it. And what I do is then once a week, every Monday morning, I share some of those insights based on buyer psychology with my subscribers. And I send a screenshot with quick notes. And essentially, it's a swipe file, and you can just take that idea and apply it to your website. So if you're interested in those kind of ideas, I would say head over to my website, which is frictionless, one word, commerce.com/join. And there you will find my newsletter sign up link page, and you can sign up. And then every Monday, you also will be waking up to a little bit of wisdom.
I'm signing up right now. Frictionless-commerce.com/join to get that. And of course, we will link to all of these things which Rishi has talked about in the show notes as well. So if you can't remember any of these links, just head on over to the show notes and we'll send those out to you. You can get all of that there, no problem. Rishi, listen, it has been an absolute joy. It has been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much for joining us in this episode of the e-commerce podcast. It's been brilliant. Really, really appreciate your time.
It was great being here. Thanks, Matt.
No problem. Thanks, Rishi. Well, let me just click here. Wasn't that fantastic? Now, if you're like me, you will have taken copious amounts of notes and your brain is kind of going at 1,000,000 miles an hour going, I've got so many ideas of how I can implement this. But like Rishi said, start with those two things. Start with your product page and start with the discoverability of your key products and just see where it leads you to. And of course, you can always reach out to Rishi. You can always connect with him. I'm sure he would be more than delighted to reach out and have a conversation with you. He's such a cool guy, super generous with his time. And wasn't he super, super valuable? Didn't he offer some super, super value with the content he was giving? I mean, wow. So a big thanks to my very special guest tonight, Rishi. Loved it. You know what? I always say this. My aim whenever I speak to a guest is to always find some real practical nuggets that I can use on my own e-commerce websites and my own e-commerce businesses. And I got a whole bunch out. I really enjoyed those 9 triggers and trying to understand how that's going to work. And so I am definitely going to be checking the discoverability rate that he talked about on my best-selling products. That's what we're going to be doing tomorrow. So what about you? Let us know what you're going to be doing. And I hope you got some great stuff out of this too. And if you did, then I would appreciate it. Obviously, if you could rate the show on iTunes or even share it out so that we can connect with more folks around the world. As I said a few seconds ago, and at the start of the show, all of the notes, the links, and even a transcript to tonight's show will be available for free. And you can get them at ecommercepodcast.net/54. No email address required. You can just go and you can just look at those and just read. The transcripts are awesome because you can just read through and just sort of remind yourself of all the great things that came out of the show. So all that's left for me to say is thanks for listening. Make sure you come back. Whoops, I smacked my computer. Make sure you come back next week as I'm going to carry on interviewing some more fab guests just like Rishi on how and we can learn how we can grow and develop our own e-commerce business. Gets lots of great tips out of it. So do come and join us. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast from. And of course, if you are on Facebook or YouTube, do connect with us on those channels as well, because we do live stream out the recording of the podcast. It goes out live and you can come and watch. You can ask your questions. You can join in the conversation to your heart's content. So do check us out on those channels as well. I think that's everything from me. My name is Matt Edmundson. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to the e-commerce podcast, and we'll be back again next week where I'll see you then.
You've been listening to the e-commerce podcast with Matt Edmundson. Join us next time for more interviews, tips, and tools for building your business online.